stranger to that, being an athlete, being a former football player, but also as an actor. I tend to think in that same way on set, the process. And if you don't cheat the process won't cheat you. So I don't think his physical presence on the sideline is necessarily as needed as it would be for some coaches, because I think his process and what he's done preemptively in terms of his craft and what he's got his coaches being aligned with, and obviously the players therefore being aligned with, I think it speaks for itself. So we just need to show up and show out. And again, I think my former teammate really needs to embrace that he's in the conversation with being one of the great coaches, and that being Kirby.
Yeah.
I think he gets to a place where he looks at that guy as, you know, this is a guy that sort of taught me so much. He's a mentor of mine. And I think we're at a good place where maybe this is the year that Kirby finally figures out, you know, how to drop the gauntlet on his mentor, whether he's on the sideline or not.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, you were a good football player at Georgia, had an opportunity at the National Football League. What do you remember most about those days at Georgia?
Oh, I would say the humor, right? Because the level of grueling, very demanding schedule that you're constantly going through, inclusive in that is being awakened with that damn bullhorn at 5 a.m. to run, to work out, and to end the night with film sessions, and that night being closer to 10 p.m. And the training table days, the humor just being swung around between the locker room banter, of course, which Michael Jordan says, you know, respective to his world, he often missed most those days in the locker room, all the way to again at the collegiate level, being at the training table and sitting there in the cafeteria and getting it in, away from the rest of the student body. Like, I miss that. I really do miss the camaraderie. I still get it in with Terrell, you know, and TD and Champ Bailey and Travis Stroud, Robert Edwards, those guys, Hines Ward, those guys are very close to me. So I can still get it in a bit, but it's a little different than when we were, you know, between the hedges. It was special, man.
Man, think about all those names that you mentioned. That was a special time. Like, who was your, I don't remember, who was your coach? You know, who was your coach back then? And why did you go to Georgia? Was like Herschel Walker? Why did you go to Georgia?
Right. Yeah. So ironically, I was recruited by a lot of schools, and then the four finalists were Ole Miss, Furman University, Ole Miss,
right,
Duke University,
okay,
Duke University, and then Georgia. So the irony is, at that time, coming out of a private school, but having grown up in the very black Decatur, Georgia, and going to a predominantly white school, you know, a la what could have happened for Ghost had he gone to choke with, you know, Leela's character of Angela having gone to the private school. There was a reality that down to the four schools that I could have gone to, it was interesting, D, because you had the Duke and the Furman, more of the academic prowess, the football stronger at Furman, actually at that time, than it was at Duke, even though Duke was in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But and then you had Ole Miss and SEC, and then you had Georgia in that fold, Wisconsin. My dream was University of Michigan, but between Bo Schembechler and Gary Moeller, that kind of didn't work out between that transition. And then I was recruited and offered by Wisconsin as well. It just seemed too far for the folks to go. So I started out, brother, at Furman University. And then I felt like I didn't mind the reality of being a smaller fish in a bigger pond, if that's what it was going to be, had I transferred to a bigger school. And then I think I had that itch inside of me as a poet who was already writing, even though I was a 200-pound football player. By the time I left Furman, I was about 190, got to Georgia and got to that training table, and it went up to about 200 pounds. So I just thought about, you know, still being close enough to home, but an hour and a half away, Northwest Mountains, that being Athens, and it was still a beautiful campus. Obviously, the school got better academically. As you know, it's now one of the more difficult schools to get into. But I just kind of put all those things together, put them on the table, and thought, even in terms of the art that I could get down with. They had such a great theatrical program. They had such a great journalism department, which Furman didn't really offer. So it was an easy transfer for me. Ray Goff and them gave me a scholarship immediately. I was back home. And again, as much as I thought I could be a small fish in a bigger pond, I wasn't necessarily that small. I absolutely learned in a very humbling way that I was kind of prominent on campus, and not just on the football field, but in terms of all the things I did. So those days at Georgia were just such a glorious time for me. But those guys, man, those guys that I aforementioned that you say are heavyweight names, even down to the acting. at those points, D, when I was in school, they were the big names. Terrell, Champ, Ron Bailey, his brother. Um, again, Robert Edwards Hines, Travis, Terrell Davis. We would spend hours talking about what he thought I could be if I went the route of art. Definitely thought I could get a shot at football. Kind of maybe thought I'd play 3 to 7 and then be out. And of course, I didn't even get it even to the 3-point before getting out. But Georgia was a timeless moment for me. That when we go back, obviously I was close to Kirby, as you know. But when we go back, those guys seem to pick up, and those conversations seem to pick up right where we left off and right where the conversations left off. It was pretty amazing. So we had Ray Goff, and then he went into Donnan, who had coached, of course, Randy Moss at Marshall. And then Donnan went into Coach Rick. And then we brought in our homeboy, and that being Kirby. And of course, in bringing in an ex-teammate, it's brought all of us back, which is a beautiful thing. So many of the players that played between that 92 point and that 96 season, all of us have found our way back. From Herschel to Andre Hastings, of course, the great running backs. It's always been running back you, Lawrence Tate, Tim Worley, all of these, Garrison Hurst, can't forget. So, it was a special time. And Eric Zier, Mike Bobo was my quarterback. Robert Edwards moved from corner to running back, which was a cool kind of moment for me because that's when he went to the coaches and said, I think, Omari should be starting. And that didn't end up happening. I got so much play time, but I remember Robert really vouching for me and going, this guy's got it. But you know how it is. I was a transfer, as Terrell Davis was. And so some of us transfers actually didn't really get a lot of that playing time because the politics start at that level. And I get it. The coaches had recruited who they had recruited. Even though we had been offered, they came in with the guys that they came in with. And here we are transferring in. So a lot of those moments, I think about Terrell Davis not even getting the playing time that he could have gotten. And then obviously now he's in the Hall of Fame. And so it's kind of interesting, bro. All of it.
No question about it. That the voice of, and you see him, the one and only Omari Hardwick joins us here on BOXTOROW with the Radio Boss. Spell, the film, it is out. Now, is it in theaters October 30th or is it in theaters?
October 30th. So it's going to be, you're right, brother. It's going to be a hybrid of the two. It'll be a limited release theatrically and limited in terms of certain cities respectively and the amount of time that it's in the theaters, but it'll also be on demand, to your point. So you can sit in the confines of your home, get your salty or your sweet desserts, whatever is your taste, get your wine, get your whatever, and sit back and be a little scared with myself and Loretta Devine, a Paramount film that I think really holds up. I think it'll be very enjoyable.
Yeah, I saw when I looked at sort of the previews, instantly what came to my mind was James Caan and Kathy Bates in Misery, but on steroids. Like, talk about it, man. This thing looks really scary.
Yeah. I think, in terms of what Jimmy Caan and Kathy Bates, which of course, as you stated, is a timeless movie, and even the way you stated, I think what makes this a bit different is that hoodoo voodoo sort of component to it. You're talking truth. You're talking a cultural template of a lot of cultures, as you know, the Haitian culture, the Creole culture in New Orleans, in certain respective parts of South Carolina, in different parts of Georgia, and again in countries beyond. So not just Haiti, but there's such a reality to a lot of people sort of making that sorcery or magical potion called hoodoo, voodoo, and then marrying that even to Christianity, and then creating this sort of hodgepodge of what they believe and what they think is the best way to lead their community or entrap somebody, which of course my character is being as trapped or as handcuffed, not only to the room like Jimmy Caan, but to this woman played by Loretta Devine. So it is absolutely that on steroids. Might give you a little bit of Angel Heart, with Bobby De Niro, Mickey Rourke, Elisa Bonet. So it gives you a little bit of that, little Eve's Bayou, but it's its own thing. And I think the director, Mark Tonderay, and the writer, I think they found a great synergy, and hopefully what we did as actors will show up on screen. I'm confident in it.
No question. Was this something you had to audition for? Did they choose you for this role?
Yeah, I'm not. The auditioning thing has, it sort of fades, obviously, at some point in your career, it fades. And you still audition for, if it's Spielberg, I'm auditioning. If it's Martin Scorsese, I'm auditioning.
Right.
but it's been a minute since I've had to do the auditions. Praise God. So no, this was offered. Ironically, Power was offered initially. Curtis and Courtney were offering that, but when I said no to Power, you know how it goes. You work in that world. So the corporate suits, everybody's got a nice size ego, and that's a good thing. That's a compliment. I wouldn't want to work with anybody that didn't have a healthy ego, operative word healthy. And so they made me audition for Power, 7 auditions for Power.
Wow.
But initially that was even an offer. So this was offered. Army of the Dead I did actually prior to this, which is a Netflix film with Dave Bautista and Zack Snyder, and that'll soon come. But Spell made it to the world and to the viewer's eyes before everything else, and it was actually the 3rd movie shot, D, but it's going to be seen first. It was the 3rd and final before COVID hit.
Wow. Okay. That's great to know. No, it's interesting. You mentioned turning down Power. Like, I couldn't even imagine. You like, people don't understand, like, being Mary Jane and a lot of the other things that you did prior to Power were pretty special, quite frankly. But why did you initially turn Power down?
I think, and I've said it before, and I've also apologized subsequent to realizing how wrong I was. Initially, I think it was having looked at Mark Wahlberg as a sort of model, and that being a guy who had done music, who had gone into the world of acting, and had become this great producer, and had put out the likes of Entourage, Boardwalk Empire. And I think I wondered, because at that point I had decided that 50 could act. I knew that he could act. That part I didn't question. But I think I wondered how that would smell, a show that could be that good. And when I read the initial breakdown of the character, I knew the character was special, but I think I wondered how that would look in terms of being put on TV and not necessarily in a world of theater. Because if you think about it, Power it's got smells or remnants of Sopranos as it pertains to TV, but if you went beyond that, it could even smell like Godfather, which it's now doing. It could even smell like, of course, Wesley Snipes turned as Nino Brown in New Jack City. So I wondered how 50 would be able to pull that off in a TV spectrum versus that of film. I thought Boardwalk Empire and Entourage made sense to be a series, but I didn't know if this would fly as a series, to be quite honest. And then, within, I guess, 3 weeks of that notion, I met with Courtney. That was a 10-minute conversation, D, before I said, okay, I'm in. Her alone, I was in. And then I talked to 50 for like 2 hours on the phone, and I just saw how bright the brother was. I saw how aligned he was, and the Midas touch that I knew he had with certain things, again, respectively. I didn't know if he could have it with this, but I soon learned that he did. So those were my initial concerns, but obviously they flew out of the window, and I did embrace what wifey prayed for. She prayed that God allow me to embrace my dominion and power. She used the word power before the show was even titled Power. So there's that part. And I guess it was God's call equally that I do that character.
No question about it. So do you miss it, or was it time sort of to move on?
It was both. It was both. I absolutely, because he was so complex, and I think you set it up really well, D, in saying that there were prior characters that had levels of complexity. It's ironic. I said this to Mara Brock and Salim Akil, Mara Brock Akil and Salim Akil, when we started being Mary Jane, and I was close to Gabby. She and I were friends, but I said, I don't really know what Andre is doing. Andre being a character from being Mary Jane. I couldn't find his thing. You know what I mean? Couldn't find his bottom. I'm like, here's a guy that drives a nice car, dresses nice, feigns like he's going to a job that makes sense that he would dress that way and drive the car that he's driving and living this life that he lives, even as a mister, if that's the analogous equivalent to a mistress, right? He's got this woman on the side, and that being Gabby's character, but he's also a married man with kids.
Yeah.
All of those things, notwithstanding, fit the part, but I didn't really feel like he had that substantive thing, that complexity, that thing that I'm always looking for as an actor, to be able to hold on to anchor myself to the reason that I did it. I didn't feel he had that, and I did the best I could at creating that. Mara, obviously being a great writer, threw in some lobs, and that aided, but there was a moment where I was like, well, how am I doing this outside of just sort of being a guy to be looked at? I didn't, physically be looked at. I didn't feel like that thing that makes me a deep cat who was a poet on the campus while playing football in college. I didn't feel like that was being triggered. And so there were complex characters that I played prior to being Mary Jane that did make sense as to why to do it. Sparkle, it did make sense to play the character I played. But then by the time you get to a job that is story-wise as hefty as Courtney allowed Power to be, and then my character to be as complex as this three-headed monster was, it's going to be hard to walk away from that hoop in basketball if it's a sport and if it's basketball. Playing on the court called Power and being able to be the point guard of that show and be as complex as that guy is, like LeBron James at 6'9" and as big as he is, bringing the ball down the court, Ghost was that complex. So that's a hard locker room to leave. I don't necessarily know if it's about the set or the story, but I definitely miss what I felt when I was at set every day because, quite frankly, D, it was my ESPNU. Bro, I was there every single day for 18 hours. At the minimal, 12 hours during that season that I was, incarcerated at the minimal, but at the maximum, sometimes 20 hours. So I absolutely miss it, but I do know very definitively that it was time to move on.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned that. I was going to ask you about immersing yourself in that role. You as a poet, in all of the various, like you've played all of these roles, it shows your greatness as an actor to me. But I'm sure in this role, man, you had to be James St. Patrick.
Had to be. There was, I'm a method actor, which I don't know. It has its limitations if people go a little bit too far with it. There's that funny moment in Tropic Thunder when, of course, the great Robert Downey Jr. says, "You never go full retard. You never go full retard." And when you think about it, his point is you can't go full method. You can't do that. And there are many actors who do. Daniel Day-Lewis comes to mind. Christian Bale comes to mind. Denzel is definitely of method. There's John Bernthal, who's a colleague of mine and obviously a contemporary of mine chronologically. There are many people who I know and admire who go method, and I'm absolutely in the huddle of being that guy. But it was hard, D, because I was a father for the first time while this thing took off. So it's totally different. And every actor whose method would tell you that, every actress included. Obviously, it's more politically correct to state even as much as an actress is an actress, she's also an actor. So even a female who goes method, when we're moms or when we're dads, we start to understand the grave difference in being a single person going method, because nobody's necessarily responsible for you coming out of that. But as James and as Ghost and then as Jamie, that's a three-headed monster. And I'm a father to, at the time, I don't know, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, all the way to them turning 6 and 3 by the time I was done. So for me, that was a real hard thing to navigate. And because of that, I could never go full, fill in the blank. I could never go, so I went there enough to be able to pull it out of my pocket when I showed up at work the following day, and put it back in my pocket when I went home at night to hug on the kids for the 3 hours that I was able to hug on the kids. It was interesting, man. That was a very, very grueling character, and I am forever humbled as to how well it was received by the legions of fans, far and wide, near and dear. 180 some plus countries, D. That's crazy to me, bro. Stars wasn't even a network necessarily viewed as a heavyweight, and all of a sudden it became number 2 to HBO, and that was during my time there. So I can hang my hat on that, and I hang a hefty bag of humility on that as well.
Yeah, it's good. Power Book is good. We miss you certainly in Power. Last couple of thoughts. A boy, a girl, a dream. So apropos now, that's not getting enough play as far as I'm concerned. I thought you and Megan Good did a phenomenal job. What about that project?
Man, that's crazy that you say that. I got one of your colleagues, and I can call him that because he is, and one of your contemporaries, and that being Stephen A. He hit me about 3 weeks ago, and he texted me and he said, "Oh, how did I miss this one? A boy, a girl, a dream." I'm sitting there surfing, the channels or whatever. I'm on Netflix or whatever he said he was on, and he said, "This is unreal." And that was just such a compliment, because it's been an interesting thing for the world to learn how much Omari is a fan of sport, and also Omari comes from sport. But it's equally been a beautiful thing for me to see how much you guys who work in sport are fans of me. And not just you as a great journalist, but also the Kyries, the Draymonds, the Emmanuel Sanders, the Sony Michels, who comes obviously from my alma mater, the Saquon Barkleys. There's so many athletes who are about Omari, and not just Ghost, but about my journey. And it blew my mind, and they must have felt something in that. So Stephen A, obviously being right there in that, he's so humbling because he equally challenges me and lets me know when he doesn't think the work is as on point as it should be. But then he lets me know in a very flattering way when it's really on point. And so I don't think that Qasim Basir, who's the incredible director, who made that film in one take, bro.
Wow.
There's no cuts on that. That's a 90-minute one take that obviously was equally as challenging for me and for Megan and, you know, the Tari Turner being the producer who came to me and said, Kas has this idea. And I knew Qasim Basir. He had done this great movie called Muslim and did a great job with that. And I was friends with him. But in those moments where you realize, Jay Ellis, obviously, as you know, Jay Ellis is in that as well. Yep. You realize that you got these people that you've known as actors, that being Jay, who I've known for a while. I met him when I did a Black Boy Wonder, which was the PSA that I did for Trayvon Martin when the verdict came in and Zimmerman got off. I met Jay Ellis during that time, but I knew Megan since she was 16 years of age. And so we got in the huddle as actors. We prayed over it because 90 minutes, you got to kind of improv. 60 pages, D, was improv. Wow. Or maybe 30. 60 pages, Qasim had scripted, he and his wife. At the time, not married yet. They're now married, they have a kid. And they did it together. They scripted about 60 pages. Bro, about 30, we had to fill in the blanks in. Total improv. 90 minutes, no cut. Wow. So when Tari Turner brought it up, and I said, can we really pull that off? How long do y'all need me? He goes, oh, a day. I said, what do you mean a day? He said, it's just one night of work. I said, what? So to answer your question, D, for us to get all the way to Sundance, which I got there with Sorry to Bother You, ironically, at the same time. The film that I did with Armie Hammer and Lakeith Stanfield. So to get, which was the first time that we saw Boots Riley at the director seat. Of course, he had never directed before. And so you go with Sorry to Bother You, you're expecting a particular response. You got Lakeith, he's this breakout star from the show Atlanta with Donald Glover. You got Armie Hammer, who's Armie Hammer. You got Boots Riley, who the world is really buzzing about. And then you got this little film that could, or maybe couldn't, called A Boy, a Girl, a Dream. And as you said, so apropos, not only to the election then, but to the election now. So apropos. And yet at Sundance, bro, the standing ovation came from a legion of people who in skin color and in age looked like they would definitely vote perhaps for a direction that we as people in a different skin color and younger in age would not vote.
Correct.
They would have standing and going crazy at Sundance showing of it in Utah. And so that just warmed my heart, bro, to think that we could actually not only extend ourselves within the demographic of age and within culture that you and I think would go watch that movie, but we extended even beyond that. And it says a lot about our country and those who really believe in the word hope and those who believe in there being execution, because you can't have hope without execution. And so they've come to me recently, brother, and they want to do a part 2 of that. So we'll see. You know, it would be interesting. But for you to like it as much as Stephen A said he liked it, and all within the last 3 weeks, you both are commenting on it, then it really does speak to something.
I'm in good company. We're HBCU guys, you know, so we're, you know, I know I'm in good company.
Of course, bro. I did the shout outs to Howard University. I did their first ever Epic 2020 homecoming, virtual homecoming, and that'll be on Saturday. My niece, who is actually a junior at Howard, she co-hosted with me. So, you know, I got none but love for HBCU. Always will. Absolutely.
You know, I wonder, it'd have been nice if you had come a little bit up the road from Furman to maybe South Carolina State. Got a good program. You know what I'm saying, Omari?
At Furman, we played them.
Yeah.
That was one of the more competitive games, of course. They got it in, bro. I had a great game that game, too. They had some receivers, bro. They had some, you know. And in high school, I was both, you know, running back and DB, but coaches always say it's hard to find great DBs, right? It's hard to find a guy that can backpedal and naturally turn with someone going that fast forward. So, of course, it became DB in college. But South Carolina State ain't nothing to slouch. Ain't nothing to slouch, bro. Talk to me.
That's right. Absolutely. So last thought, LeBron winning a championship with a third team. Yeah, I know you're a sports guy. Your thoughts?
It's still hard for me to adopt either LeBron in the purple and yellow or gold or whatever they're called, or for the purple and gold to be adopting LeBron. It's still difficult for me to see such. It really is. I've always felt like, by the way, I think he's the second greatest ever to play the game of basketball. Which, I mean, come on. He's incredible. We've never seen anything like that. I think that Kobe has a different thing. And I think that Kobe will always be one of those guys who sort of gets left out in certain levels of the competition as it pertains to that ranking. And I don't think it's about ranking, but I do understand it's a team sport. It's not track. And we're not talking about 4x100 relay. We're talking about just the 100 relay as it pertains to track, or the 100. And so I think because it's a team sport, you got to think about LeBron as that. Sometimes people think he plays selflessly too much. Sometimes people wonder, is he a point guard or a forward? And I always say he's an amalgamation of Dominique Wilkins meets Magic Johnson, or vice versa, who can guard 5 people. So what he's done is just incomparable. 3 rings with 3 different teams, and having gone to the finals, 10 or 11 times? What is it, D? 10 or 11?
Yeah, it's 11? Yeah.
11 times, and be able to come away with 3 rings. That year that Dirk snuck in and got that one that he could have also won at Miami, being perhaps the 4th that sort of got away from him. But when you think about it, I always thought that the Akron kid, who absolutely is no stranger to the greater parts of Ohio, and Ohio claiming him, I felt like going to Miami was the University of Miami for him. I felt like this genius kid who was equally as bright as the other guy that went straight to the league out of high school. You have his jersey somewhere right there on your
left. There you go.
All right. Those guys were so bright. Kobe would have been at Duke University, as you know. And then you get a LeBron who would have gone maybe to Duke as well. I felt like LeBron needed the University of Miami, and it was just simply a professional experience called the Miami Heat. I felt like the big brother on campus was Dwayne Wade. I felt like with the boy, the fatherhood relationship that LeBron didn't have, that Michael Jordan had, that Kobe had, that Magic Johnson had, that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had. I felt like he got remnants of it being around Pat Riley in that way, being around big brother Dwayne Wade. And so that made sense. The Cleveland uniform absolutely made sense. The Miami uniform equally did. I still am struggling as a guy that is not much younger than me, who I root for as much as I do. He is one of my favorite Capricorns God made. It's really interesting for you to ask that question, because I'm like, there is that part. I forgot he's a Laker. And he just won a couple nights ago as the Laker that I forgot he is. I still make it where Kobe is the last. It's weird for me. I'm sure it'll be a little bit easier for me as he continues to play 2-3 more years or what have you. But I can't say anything but good things about the brother. I just think he's second to none in what he's done. He's also made a brotherhood out of the NBA. He really has. The NFL is way behind in terms of what they've allowed in terms of the voice of at least the black athlete. The NBA is not. David Stern liked men that look like you and I. Adam Silver is no distant stranger to that. He equally really rocks for our story and for us to have a voice. And I think that LeBron has done a smackdown incredible job, bro, of galvanizing the league, including the owners, including, front office. But he's made a brotherhood out of all of those that are down low playing on the court. No slights to Chris Paul and what he's meant to the Players Union Association, but LeBron has done something that I've never necessarily seen done in athletics as it pertains to being that good, that physically gifted, that big team, little I, that dominant of a force, going to the finals as many times as he had, and then putting his big ass wingspan around all of these men of all colors, but absolutely of his color, creating what he has, and then creating schools in the midst of doing that. There's that little part. Like, dog is unreal, to be honest with you. He's unreal. Yeah,
it's crazy. Spell is the new film, again, in limited, you said in theaters, right? And then also.
Yep, and also on demand, so you can stay in the confines of your crib. And just like my good brother D caught A Boy, Girl, A Dream, y'all can sit on your couch, you ain't even got to move your ass, and you can watch Spell and be scared to death before you go to bed. October 9th.
Very much looking forward to it. The trailer is great. The one and only Omari Hardwick joins us here on the Radio Boss. Omari, man, this was great, man. Like, it was a long time. I gotta be honest, a long time coming. Well worth the wait, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you, bro. I'm rocking for you. I'm always rooting for you.